Good morning, friends. Welcome to another marvelous Monday of science learning. Today we're going to review how to read a nonfiction passage and make Cornell notes for that passage. So this is the first page in your STEMscopedia, and this page is about matter and energy transfer. So I'm going to begin by putting the date at the top of my page. And then I'm going to give my notes a title. And I can just take my title right from the passage, Matter and Energy Transfer. So Cornell Notes have three main sections. They have one section for important facts or vocabulary words. One section for questions. Now this section you can write teacher-like questions where you kind of like pretend that you're coming up with your own quiz and write teacher-like questions using question words who, what, where, when, why, or how. Or you can also record questions that reflect things you're confused about, things you would like to learn more about. And then last, you're going to write a summary where you just record one or two sentences about the most important point. If you're not sure how to set this up, in addition to the review I just gave you in my video, I also posted a slide in the Monday folder, the document that says upload science notes here. When you click on that and open it up, the first slide tells you how to make Cornell notes. All right, so let's go ahead and start reading. Imagine for a moment that you stay after school one day to clean up the classroom. While cleaning, you move some plants away from the sunny windows. A week later, you remember to move the plants back. You notice something strange has happened. Instead of standing upright, the plants appear to be leaning toward the windows. Why? Okay, now, this is a quick reading lesson for you. This first paragraph is not teaching us anything critical about our science lesson for today. Instead, this is an introduction that's meant to grab your attention and make you curious about the topic. Now, whether or not you think this first paragraph is interesting and exciting, and whether or not it has successfully grabbed your attention, it hasn't taught us anything critical, so I'm not going to include it in my science notes. Most nonfiction reading starts with at least a sentence or maybe a whole paragraph that's really meant to be what we call a hook or an attention grabber. Let's continue on to the second paragraph. Plants need sunlight to survive. That is a critical idea to record. If a plant is moved away from sunlight, then special cells in the plant help it turn toward the sun. So I guess I'm thinking that that's like a survival mechanism that plants have. Plants have special cells that help them to grow towards the sun. The sun's energy allows plants to produce their own food. Plants then use this food energy to grow and reproduce. Okay, now this I can represent with a diagram. Not all of your notes need to be written in complete sentences. So I'm going to write sun's energy. Then I'm going to draw an arrow, allows plants to produce their own food. And this makes sense to me because we started, or you have probably started learning about this back in like second grade, right? Did you learn about plants in second grade? label the stem, label the leaf, label the flower, and talk about how plants use photosynthesis to produce their own food. So a lot of times when we're reading nonfiction, we can make connections to previous knowledge or things we already knew. Plants then use this food energy to grow and reproduce. I'm going to write that down. However, not all organisms can make their own food. How do those other organisms get their food energy? Do they get it from the sun? This is like the critical question for today. Where do all food chains and food webs get their energy? All of the food energy that passes between organisms comes from the sun. I'm going to write that down. That's really the critical point for today. You might be wondering how this is possible. After all, humans can't eat sunlight. Plants and other organisms that use sunlight to absorb it and then use that energy to make their own food. Hang on, I've got to read that again. I didn't read that well. Plants and other organisms that use sunlight absorb it and then use that energy to make their own food. That energy passes to other organisms that eat the plants. For example, grass uses sunlight to make food. A deer gets energy by eating the grass. After that, a wolf gets energy by eating the deer. The movement of food energy from one organism to another is called a food chain. I was wondering when they were going to define that for me. I'm going to copy that down. The movement of food energy from one organism to another is called a food chain. Take a look at the food chain on the right. The arrows show how food energy is passed from one organism to the other. The plants use energy from the sun to make their own food. Both antelopes and squirrels get energy by eating plants. The hawk gets energy by eating the squirrels. Mountain lions and coyotes get energy from eating the antelopes. So here we have just a simple food chain showing us how all energy for living things starts with the sun and then moves from one organism or living thing to another. So I can see the arrows show the movement of energy from one organism to the other. A lot of times when kids look at food webs or food chains, they think that the arrow shows who is eating who, but that is not the case because the antelope doesn't eat the coyote. Instead, the arrows show energy moving from the antelope to the coyote in the form of the coyote is actually eating the antelope. Arrows in a food chain show the movement of energy from one living thing or organism to another. Okay, now I'm going to let you do your own questions without my assistance. Just remember that questions start with a question word such as why, how, where, who, when. I feel like I'm missing one. Or, of course, there's what. So, like, an example would be, what can we learn from looking at a food chain? and you would record that question with its answer, we can learn about the movement of energy by looking at a food chain. So I need to see at least 3 questions in your question column, and then for your summary, you're going to write 1 or 2 sentences that show the most important or the most critical key points from this reading passage. Notice I skipped this last little chunk of text here. I'm going to just talk about that tomorrow, okay? Because this is like the beginning of the next section.